Welcome to the Modern Marketing for Today's Accountants podcast, where our experts will share best practices on running your firm in the digital age. This podcast is brought to you by CountingWorks Pro. Let's get started.
All right, thank you for joining us for another episode of Modern Marketing for Today's Accountants. My name is Lee Reams, and I will be your host for today's subject, how tax and accounting practices are surviving the Great Resignation. I know that's a media-driven term, but on Twitter, on LinkedIn, everywhere, listening to our clients, I know that keeping people around right now has been a real challenge. A lot of people have retired. A lot of older partners have retired. A lot of firms have closed down, and that's made a huge challenge for tax and accounting practices as they go into another busy season. So I know we are a little off our digital marketing focus, but we thought it'd be a good topic to cover with so much turmoil in the staffing space for the tax accounting practices. So I'm joined today by Lucero Smith. She is the founder and CEO of your-coo.com, an operations and human resources consulting firm based in Irvine, California. Before I introduce Lucero, I think accountants realize a lot of you guys are jumping into the virtual CFO world. So understanding what Lucero does with your COO is very similar to what it seems to be an exploding niche for a lot of our professionals. So welcome, Lucero. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little background and how you ended up in operations and HR. And obviously, I know this, but you have a little bit of a legal background. I think a lot of that kind of plays into tax and accounting space.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Lee. I'm so happy to be here. So I actually got into operations and HR 21 years ago. It was a job that I took when I was in college, and I started out as the only employee of a startup company. And that startup grew, and I stayed with them over the course of 5 years, and I built out their operations. I was their head of HR, and I just continued on that path. Most recently, I left the corporate world as COO of a legal tech company. And before that, I worked for 7 years at a high volume personal injury law firm out of Newport Beach. And I did all of their HR and operations as well. So in addition to that, I've worked in various industries, and honestly, I just love it. The marriage between operations and HR makes for great culture, and honestly, what your audience probably cares about the most is performance, and profit benefits tremendously when you've got these pieces nailed down. And in terms of the Great Resignation, which everybody's talking about, I will actually say in a lot of ways, people feel like it's the great frustration. So there's, angst on both sides of that piece. But there's a lot that can be done. And so I'm glad that we get to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, you'll have a lot of great expertise and insight. I think law firms, especially small to medium size, are set up very similar to the experiences of a lot of our tax and accounting practices. So I'm excited to talk about this. So I'm going to start with my first question. So most accountants, and I'm right there, I don't even want to say most accountants, when they hear the term HR, human resources, they think of big companies and employee headaches. I mean, all it is once you're dealing with HR, it's just like, oh, my legal issues, push it as far away from my day-to-day work as I can. And that reality, this doesn't apply to them. So, I would say then why would even smaller practices, 1 to 10 tax and accounting practices start investing in human resources, and kind of what is the benefit that they'll get from putting that investment in?
So human resources is really meant to take away a lot of the headache that business leaders are dealing with. One of the biggest things that you don't really realize takes a lot of energy away is the hiring and the firing. So beyond what an HR does from day to day, there's those really high level pieces that take so much time, so much emotional energy, and it is very draining for leaders. So to give that to someone is ideal. It's very important. That aside, HR, when it's done well, it should feel like the heartbeat of your organization. It should feel like the blood is getting pushed from this place, the resources to every single department and position and performance. I mean, it touches everything and it should feel really good. A lot of the problems with HR is that they care so much about compliance, they forget to focus on the care of the employee. And so I think finding the right HR is the most important piece. Otherwise, you do end up with exactly what you're talking about, like compliance and robotic. And what is the point then? Like, those pieces are easy. It's the care piece. And that's where the performance culture and that's where retention of employees comes from. So like I said, it should enhance your culture. Human resources should also really keep in check performance, and they should be managing that piece for you as the business owner and supporting your leadership team in managing that as well. And also, you have to consider that outside of your office, there are a lot of employees that are dealing with serious things, deaths, health-related things, family issues, boyfriends, girlfriends, all kinds of things, right? Your HR can also offer support to those employees. And I know that's not really your responsibility, right? But if you got a better, more consistent, higher performing employee because they had someone that they could speak to, it would be worth it. Now, in terms of small to large, I think if you are less than 5 to 10 employees, you can probably manage that piece yourself or share it with someone else in your office. When you get to, I'm going to say 15 to 20, 25 employees, you should be outsourcing a portion of it, bring in a consultant, potentially someone like me, anyone that can offer some kind of support, because it is going to take a lot more energy and a lot more time. And then once you've gone over that 25, 30, you really need to have someone in-house. And this is just, again, to make sure that you're managing the compliance piece and also just the care and maintenance of employees.
Yeah, I was going to say when you get over 25, it's time to retire, because then the headaches come with it. So you mentioned a couple things that I think are important that I also see in my own company. And you know, a lot of times you think of HR as more of the compliance issues. People are upset. You're having people that are not getting along. How do you manage those relationships? But you made two good points. One is the well-being of the employees, because they do have lives. And as a leader, as an entrepreneur, you know, if any boardroom meeting or any entrepreneur meeting, they will just, you know, bang about how I can't believe this person had this issue and, you know, all the things I had to do about it. But the reality is, from the employer's point of view, the partner's point of view, you know, that's kind of getting in the way of their mission. But the reality is, it's time to change your mindset to realize, no, that they are part of your team that's going to get you to the end result. So maybe some more empathy, and maybe, you know, not being as stringent on some of the rules and reporting. And, you know, I've heard horror stories about people needing time off to go to the doctor and no, you can't, you know, that kind of stuff. So I think that'd be issue one. And then the thing that you said about performance. So we're starting to get into more, we're using a product called Perdoo, Perdoo, but it's more about objectives. It's following the OKR, Google kind of way to get performance, how to set performance by teams, by overall companies, and be able to watch the results and have a monetary side of it. And we actually putting bonus pools on and saying, you know, level one is 0. That's what you're supposed to do. If we hit this, everyone shares. If we hit this objective, even better. But we're letting it kind of change the metrics that we're watching over time. I think that's kind of important. So for smaller firms, if you wanted to put in your own objectives, so what is your suggestion for both those things? You kind of got into it, but how do you think you get better performance from employees by perhaps maybe even making them more accountable, but at the same time making it kind of fun? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. We touch on it. Well, and I don't know if we'll touch on it in the same way later, but I do think that employees need to have some kind of bonuses, some kind of incentives for the performance that they do. Well, okay, here's the thing. I see it both ways. When you hire an employee to do a job and you pay them for that job, I think that's good. Now, I want to say that companies are fear driven to give these extras, right? They're trying to use these extras to retain their employees and keep them there. So if that's one part of how you do that, how you additionally incentivize an employee, okay, I think that's great if that works for your team. Most employees want a little bit of two things. They want money. So when you take them on like retreats and team building things, like that just doesn't make a lot of sense. So what you're talking about is a monetary incentive. I love that. Employees love that. But the other side of it is when they get into work every day, do they want to be there? Do they still want to work towards those additional incentives? So if you overwork an employee and you're not touching base with them, the conversation in their head and with each other is, oh my gosh, we have so much work, right? We're overworked. Good thing they give us these bonuses. Good thing they're helping us out on the side, because if not, I wouldn't be here. Now, an employee that is constantly communicating with you, you're talking to them, hey, how was your weekend? Okay, great. Have you guys gone to any cool new restaurants? Like just the simple little things, right? Those tiny touches that actually shows them that you care and you want to hear from them beyond like, hey, did you finish that thing by that deadline, right? Then you're going to get the employee who says, I'm actually doing great. Like if you need help with anything else, let me know. So that's actually the more important piece. We can't let fear drive us into throwing more money at employees because that's actually not the solution. It's why it's not working for anyone. You have to have that connectivity to your employees, just simple little touches. And if that's not who you are, that's okay. But bring someone in who can be that person, because then the conversation between the employees is, gosh, they really care. I love working here. I wouldn't mind. I mean, I'm busy, but I could take on a little bit more work. Like that's not as big of a deal. And then that bonus you give them in addition is like cherry on top, right? That just throws it over the edge. I hope I didn't deviate too much. Was that?
We're going to deviate this whole time. Okay. So I think it's a podcast. So that's what we're supposed to do.
I love it. I love those additional incentives. I love the bonuses, but if that's all you're doing, it's not enough. It's actually the non-monetary things that matter more. And then those things definitely add value.
Okay. So let's get into a little bit of that. And I'm going to go back to the tax accounting space. There's, some big trends. Some are saying that the turnover in the industry is about 20%, which is because of both demographics. So in aging, I don't know, there's numbers between 55 and 58, the average or median age for the tax and accounting industry. And then you throw on the pandemic, things have changed. People are not locked into their location anymore. They've moved, blah, blah, blah. So how can small to medium-sized tax practices combat this trend? I know we in our pre-talks, you had talked about onboarding and having a nice kid. I'm watching the WeWork Apple show, and their onboarding was hand a manual and a laptop and then point to a desk and here's your shot glass, and then there you're onboarded. But I wanted to hear kind of some of your suggestions here.
Okay, so just in terms of bringing them on board and retaining them, right? Positively affecting turnover. Okay, so in terms of your interviewing and bringing them on, I'm going to split this up into two things. So first, the things you talk about, you really need to understand employees' goals and their long-term plans. A lot of people, when they're hiring and managers ongoing, they're like, I don't want to know what they want to do. I don't want to talk to them about their goals because I don't want them to think about their goals, right? They're here. I need them to do their job. I need them to be scared of leaving, right? This is what I need them to focus on. Well, I'm actually not opposed. I support you talking to them about their goals, even at the point of hiring them. I love to know, how does this position specifically work into your long-term plan? You may find out that they don't want to be with your type of organization long-term, but your organization adds some kind of value to their career plan. You need to know that because it's how you're going to manage their growth within your organization. It's going to give them opportunities, and you're going to have built-in growth and potential in these people. Don't shy away from people that want to be with you for 2 years. And this is how it translates to law firms, right? I can't tell you how many people I interviewed and they would say, yeah, I'm applying to law school next year. So in my mind, I need this person, but they're leaving me in 2 years. Do I hire them? Most of the time I would. So it's okay to understand that, and you just build that into your hiring and staffing plan. Like, I'm going to have this person for 2 years out, or this person wants to stay for a really long time. And it gives you an idea of where you should put them, and if you need to be aware of potential moves down the road. And that's good to know. The more information, the better. And then you need to plan ahead for hiring. So I hear all the time, I need a new employee right now. Right now.
That's what LinkedIn's for.
Yes, true. You really need to plan for your next hire 4 to 6 months before you need them. You should be actively hiring when the people who are assuming the tasks of this new hire, when they're at about 80% capacity, that's when you need to start looking. Often, it's not the first hire. You might hire someone, it doesn't work out. You hire someone else, and let's say you're training those people for 3 to 4 weeks. Well, now if you're 2 hires in and training, that's 2 months. If you give yourself 4 to 6 months to start looking, actively recruiting, interviewing, and hiring, you're going to get the right person, and you'll have enough time to train them so that when they come on board, they're ready to go. When you actually need them, they're ready to go. Now, the other piece to that is everyone who's around them. They're not stressed out. They're not spread too thin. They're not overworked. People are excited and engaged in training this person and supporting them because they've had enough time to get this person onboarded as well. And so now the last piece you were talking about is when you're bringing them on board and the training process. Whoever is training your new employees needs to, first and foremost, have an excellent attitude. There cannot be any question if this person loves what they're doing and where they're working. Second, they need to be very knowledgeable. Nothing's worse than sitting down with the person that's training you and having them say, I actually don't know, but like, we can just do it this way. And I do, and I totally get by with doing that. Oh my gosh, no. So you need to know who's training them, and it should be consistent. Passing them off from one person to another also is not good. You need to think about making their roots in the organization go really, really deep. Okay. So think about a plant, right? You're not going to change its pot every day, right? You need to put it in there, give it good soil, nourishment, keep it in one spot, kind of the same idea. And you as a leader, or whoever the direct report is of that person, if they're not the ones who are training them, they should be constantly checking in. Hey, I'm here if you need anything. Let me know if you have questions, because right off the bat, you want to create that line of communication. That is not necessary, but it is huge for culture. And it's huge for you maintaining the respect of new employees as they come on board to make yourself available. So that's really important when you're bringing people on.
Well, you touched on culture. 2 things that I want to get into culture next, because when the next question I was going to say is, how do you create culture? And especially when you're in a smaller firm, it's a little more difficult. And there's what is good culture, bad culture. What a lot of times I think people try to play a part, which they aren't actually. And there's whatever they see or read on CNBC, and they try to pretend to be that when they're not. I think that gets people in trouble. One of the things you mentioned, I thought was important, and you used a nice metaphor. I love metaphors with the potted plant. One thing, though, that I found as practices grow, and any business grows really, is you might have your first team that starts you out as your startup. And then you get up to $1 million, let's just say for accounting firms, $1 million, $2 million in revenue, and you're starting to grow, and you actually can outgrow the the employees that you hired. So you might outgrow their desire. They might not want a higher stress job. They might not want as much bureaucracy, more corporate. It might be their skill sets. And we talk about this in kind of our planning meetings and board meetings as we grow, is we're very loyal to our people. And if you're doing a good job with us, you're staying with us, and we're going to give you every opportunity to grow. And the way a lot of them do is you offer that to this person who is, let's say they're heading up your marketing side. You offer them the ability to grow in this position, but this is what you need to learn. These are the skills you need to be able to do. If you can't do this, I will hire somebody in that position. You can work with them, but I want you to know that we want to give you this opportunity. So there's two things. I'm just adding this as a side note to our discussion. So let's get back into culture. But it is a challenge. A lot of firms as they grow, and they'll go through, team A, team B, team, C, and people that you started with that you would think would be with you forever can't handle when you're doing $5-10 million in revenue. So it's a different thing, which goes into my favorite question about culture. And a lot of younger,
Can I say something about that really quick though? I've seen this, and I actually have seen a lot of leaders shy away from creating boundaries around that growth. And it's healthy to create boundaries around that. You don't have to say, hey, I have this position. I need these things done. Can you do it? Okay, great. They're probably going to say yes because they assume money is attached to it, right? So I think it's really good to say, I need to know if this is something you can do. Let's give you 3 weeks to figure it out. Let's give you 4 weeks to figure it out. Create a boundary around it. If this feels like a good fit, I see you doing really well, and you're loving these new responsibilities and not stressed out about them, then let's talk about compensation. And let's talk about you keeping this role. If it's not a great fit, that's okay. Let's keep you where you're at. You're still going to have opportunities to grow. We're still going to have this conversation when something else comes up down the road. And I'm going to find someone else who can be in that role. So now when you bring that other person in, if it doesn't work out, this junior employee, this, lower position employee, they're not pissed off. You gave them the chance first, but you didn't waste so much time, right? So how much time do you really have to give them before you need that position filled? As a leader, you have to know that. For the sake of your other team, I know what question's coming, and I'm going to touch on this again. You have an obligation to make sure you have high-performing people doing their job well. Your organization can only thrive and do as well as your lowest performing employee is. That's how you need to think about it. So putting them back in a role where they're excelling in and checking all those boxes in terms of how much time and patience you have to fill that role. That's all very important. So don't shy away from that also, creating structure around it.
I like that. So let's get into culture because we've been dancing around it. What are the components? I don't want to spend too much time on this. I want to get through a lot of our questions, but give a brief description of how you would set up culture, from leadership to communication, kind of the insights there.
Okay. So what I feel you absolutely need to have great culture. Some of these are obvious, some of them less obvious. Leadership, your plan for your staffing plan. So slow to hire, quick to fire. I'll get into these just a little bit so we can keep moving. Open communication, competitive pay, scalable promotion plan, and that also ties into your staffing plan. And this is so basic, but honestly, clean, fully stocked, organized workspaces. And if people are working from home, figure out cool ways that you can help them create that within their own space. So I'm going to go into leadership really quick. There's a quote. It's on the movie Remember the Titans, and I absolutely love that movie, and I love this quote, and it's basically attitude reflects leadership, right? And that is absolutely the case. So there's this lie that we were told as kids to be yourself. If you're lazy, if you're a jerk, if you cannot be patient in difficult times, if you are not a caring individual, don't be yourself. And if you just struggle to control those pieces of you, you need to be honest with yourself. Find a leader that can come in and create a buffer between you and the employees, because the leadership at the top that they have constant exposure to needs to be what you expect from them. If you expect them to be willing and open and generous with their excitement and motivated, you need to be that. If that's not you, bring someone else in who can do that for you. Okay.
Well, that means like 80% of our people, poor tax and accounting, especially during tax season, they're all going to be, nope, can't deal with this. I can't be the leader right now.
Yeah. Or just
I'm
step
kidding.
away.
It's a joke. I know.
But, no. I know
it's really important, because I think a lot of times, especially in stressful industries like ours, especially accountants can get very short, and they get short not only with their clients, but I'm sure their coworkers and everyone else. So I think it's a good deep breath kind of, Zen moment time. And I think it's important to understand, especially when you're building your culture out. So I'm agreeing with you. I'm just laughing.
Okay. So number 2, slow to hire, quick to fire. I know this seems like a staffing thing. It's not. This is massive for culture. If your team sees that you are keeping people employed and paying them, and they've got a bad attitude, they don't do their job well, they don't do their job at all, they will lose respect for you as the leader. They will assume you cannot, either you don't see it, you're not paying attention, you're dumb because you're not picking up on these things. The only thing that comes along with keeping unqualified and underperforming employees in your team is it diminishes who you are as a leader in the organization, and the culture just goes to poo without.
I would agree with that. I mean, the best lessons I've had in my own career have been being too slow to identify. And as the career goes, you get quicker and quicker to the point you're like, okay, and we have, lucky for us at CountingWorks Pro, even in our team leader meetings, we feel like we have a really strong team, and we try to put things I guess you would call it ways to identify, is there a weak link? Is that person need assistance? Let's help them. If not, let's replace them and move on and improve. And anytime someone moves on from the team for whatever reason, we always try to hire a better version of that person. So I think it's important. So I think that's good for culture. I know we have a lot more to talk about. I want to talk, you said a little bit about the clean workspace. And to me, that goes into CountingWorks. We're basically a digital front office for tax and accounting pros. I believe, and I try to communicate with our client base, that positioning and branding, that image, that prospects that might be hiring, you might be looking to hire, they're going to look at your website. They're going to read the reviews about you. They're going to read other, employee reviews if there's been other people that were there, and they're going to make judgments right away, even before they respond to an ad. So kind of, what would be your suggestions? And think about my industry as well. How can they attract more people purely by the way they market themselves and their firm, not necessarily with the career section, but just overall when people are, just the way people now research before they call.
Yeah. I mean, if you aren't clearly communicating what your mission is, your vision, what your offerings are, what your expectations are through everything that you're putting out there, candidates are going to have a really hard time connecting what they've done and their goals to who you are. And so to keep it simple, that is very important. And those are the things you want to put on there. Because when I'm a candidate and I'm looking at my resume and I'm thinking about where I want to go, I'm going to look at your website and I'm going to say, how does what's on paper and where I'm headed connect to this organization? So I need to see it. I need to read about it, right? So there's that piece. Actually was interviewing someone last week for a position, and this girl was awesome. She said, "Oh yeah, I noticed that you guys give back. I saw this on your Instagram, and I noticed you posted about this on your LinkedIn, and your website talked about this." And also for me, as someone who's interviewing, I love that, because what that tells me is they've gone above and beyond. They really did their research. They took the time. I interviewed two amazing candidates that day. It was their final interview. One had all these great details from our social media, from the website, from everything. And the other one couldn't touch on any of it. So I loved that. It really made who we were going to hire a very straightforward answer. So that's the other side of why those pieces are important. Before we used to just study and interview or study so much and prepare for interviews. And most people don't do that. Some people still do. And when they do, I think it's a more obvious choice because they did their homework, and you create that possibility.
And I'd like to explain that to accountants who are very busy. And every once in a while we hear someone that I don't have to market. And it's like, all you're doing is always marketing. It's the reputation you have is going to dictate how much you can charge, how long people are going to stay with you, and then even the type of people that you attract in the workplace. So you had touched on a couple of things that I want to go into, a little bit about looking at the resume and how I fit. So what are some of the attributes that, especially post-pandemic, still in pandemic, whatever you want to call, that people are looking for when they're deciding where to work? Meaning remote, culture, pay, benefits, there's all these different elements. So how would you explain kind of what are the most important to the tax and accounting people, so they can start thinking in their heads, okay, these are the things that are important to the people I'm trying to recruit?
Pay, compensation, that's still number one. And I don't care if you do bonuses and incentives, their base pay, that has to be competitive. That's the number one thing people are looking at. So hang up, they'll turn things away because of it. And unfortunately, we're just in a crazy environment right now where even Target will pay $25 an hour for an employee. So you really have to just be real about what competitive pay looks like. Number two, I'm grouping these together because I really do see these as groups. So number two, they want to know about culture. They want to know that there's an opportunity to grow. And they do want to know about work-life balance. Those things I would say are equally number two, depending on the person. But studies right now show that people are leaving because of pay and opportunity to grow. So I'm going to keep those maybe just slightly elevated from culture and work-life balance. Culture and work-life balance is more of why they're going to stay. Third is benefits. So the obvious is health, dental, vision, 401k, PTO. Those are really important. And then there's the secondary benefits, like the food you have at the office, coffee, tea, snacks, whatever it may be. Those are really important too, because if an employee can stay at the office and skip a lunch that day, then they're thinking in terms of money. Like, that's money I didn't have to spend today. That's awesome. And remote, I'm going to say is last, because this is the one place where I feel like companies right now are able to push back. Everyone does want remote work still, but listen, how I would pitch it is your ability to increase your pay important to you? Is your ability to grow important to you? I guarantee people are going to say yes to both of those things. Well, if you're not in a place where I can see you from day to day, if I can't interact with you from day to day, if I can't imagine work life without you, how do you plan to grow in those two ways? So realistically, you want to be in the office as an employee so that you have exposure and visibility to growing. And I think that's just a straightforward conversation.
Or you're just on Slack like we are, and you're like, you know exactly what everyone's doing. But I think that is true. It's becoming more difficult, especially I think people are zoomed out. I know I even cut down the amount of meetings we had, or shortened them, made them more agenda driven. So I think you get more out of it. But I think that's an important thing to think about.
Yeah. And honestly, I took that approach because remote work is not a hard sell. The hard sell right now is bringing people back into the office.
Right. Which goes into, I'm going to get into a little bit about the tax and accounting space. and the pocket protector stereotypes. And there's been a lot of articles written in the trades, especially the accounting trades, about this subject. And is it harder to get the younger workforce to get into accounting, get into what they consider maybe a task-related versus a consultative-related industry? And what's happened is the profession has changed dramatically because of technology. Technology has made a lot of tasks that were, the boring tasks that what accounting used to be, and has automated. So a lot of accountants have morphed into more consultants, business coaches, whatever you want to call it. I think it's more lucrative. But how do you, or what would you suggest for the industry as a whole? And this could be a new PR campaign that we create to get out of that stereotype that is kind of like a boring, stressful work, but it's actually very rewarding. You can see companies grow. You can see your advice actually, creating better financial results or outcomes. So, how would you, what advice would you give for that?
I understand the concern around it. I think that there's a huge missed opportunity here where you need to talk to potential candidates about how this is something that works across every industry: accounting, finance, HR, sales. Those are all, they do not need to be industry specific, right? So if I work at a law firm, or I work at an accounting firm, or if I'm working in retail and I'm doing accounting work, it translates all the way across. So I would be pushing learn valuable skills that can work across any industry. I'd put that in huge bold letters. That is really, really important. You can't do that with, say, marketing. Marketing, if you market in retail and you want to go into legal, they're going to be like, well, what experience do you have? You're like, well, I market. Yeah, but you don't know anything about law firms, right? So this is a very special piece, and that should be communicated more. That's how you bring them in. And then how you keep them is how you show them they can grow once they're in the organization. And also, what do we know about younger people right now? They love living on TikTok and Instagram, this generation of instant gratification, and everything looks beautiful. And if I don't like it, then I'll put a filter on it, or I'll go buy something else, right? It's just right now, I want it right now, like the ultimate temper tantrum. This also plays into those needs and those wants. If this is a skill set that you can use across the board in many industries, it actually creates opportunities for you. Again, I can see why you might be hesitant to communicate that, but once you get them in the door, it's your responsibility to keep them. I still think that is the strongest pitch to getting beyond that stereotypical understanding of working at an accounting firm, what that looks like.
They're a lot of fun. Trust me, our CPA firm they have much more fun than I do. And I've gone on vacations with them, and yeah, they're not the stereotype. So that's for sure. All right. So I want to go into now, let's get into the actual in a practice. And one of the issues is kind of retention, or people leaving because they feel like they can't grow anymore in the firm. How can tax and accounting firms address that, and perhaps, communicate that as to the, younger staff, perhaps people that aren't partners yet, that then go off on their own. And then the fear is they take their clients with them. So, how would you create a structure around this?
I love this question. It's another thing that I want to say leaders usually shy away from. They're like, if we don't talk about it, then maybe they won't notice, but you have to hit it right on the head. So we deal with this at law firms. There's two types of people. I call them the haves and the have-nots, right? I didn't make that up. Comes from something. And you build structure and growth into that. So your haves are the accountants. They have the technical pieces. They're in a different position than the people who are more in supporting roles. At law firms, it's attorneys. If you come in as a legal receptionist, you might move into case management or paralegal work, but without a law degree, you're never going to be at the level of the attorney. Same thing with accountants. So you've got your halves and you need to create structure in there. So what do they come in at? Maybe they come in at junior, they can grow into associate, they can grow into senior, executive, whatever there is. Create a structure around them, create pay incentives, create bonuses, whatever you want to do, and make sure you're connecting with them. You know, maybe a senior executive level gets to go to a monthly lunch or something with you, something extra special, right? So build that in there. At the end of the day, it is hard to start your own company. It is, even if you're leaving with clients, it's really challenging to get that going. So the easier you make it for them to do their work, enjoy where they're doing their work, and get paid for it, they're not going to want to leave. They're less inclined. And then you do the same thing with the have-nots, right? You've got your entry person, your mid-level person, your senior person. This also is great for scaling, but you build that pay incentive in there, the growth opportunity, all of that. And everyone is happy, but you kind of just have to be open about that.
I think more mature firms, they know that and grow into it. I bet you the 1 to 10 shop, very few are actually doing that now. And I think that's some great advice. And just to kind of look at their structure even before they start and planning ahead for growth, you know.
Well, and I know as you're saying that, like the less than 10, you know, do they really need that structure? Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm saying yes. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. You're never, even if you have 2 people, well, are they at that junior level? Are they both starting there together? Do you have a junior? Do you have a mid-level? You can start that right from the get-go. It makes for very clear expectations about where they're headed. And that is the biggest thing for employees. You need it to know what their performance expectations are now. They need it to know where their opportunities are down the road.
All right. I like it. That's some good advice. I didn't even really think about that for our profession, but I think it fits perfectly. I'm actually going to skip through a little bit, but I'm going to go to the whole issue of making a bad hire. And we all have gone through it. You've mentioned before, if you make a bad hire, you might lose a few months, and then it might take you 4 to 6 months to basically fill a position. That's lost opportunity. There's a lot of wasted time and wages, right? So I would like some best practices that you could share on the hiring and recruiting processes. I know we have been, and I mentioned LinkedIn earlier, we have kind of figured out our own little niche using LinkedIn, and we've been very successful, but I would love to hear kind of your approach and what you suggest for our industry.
So I love LinkedIn too. LinkedIn, I will say, is like 80% of where I do my recruiting and networking for hiring people. So I'm constantly connecting with people on LinkedIn. Maybe it's your every other Friday coffee break, you spend an hour on LinkedIn. I look for candidates that are in school studying things that might make them a good fit for my organization or what I have coming up. Schools that I really love. Like I love recruiting from Chapman out here in Southern California. I love that school. So I will put in Chapman, I'm looking for these students, and then I'm just connecting with them. Hey, you might be a great fit for a position I have coming up. Let's connect. And 100% of the time they say yes. So I have this pool of people in my LinkedIn network now. So when I have a position that becomes available and I post it, I get messages like crazy. I'm not even paying for the ad. I just have people say, oh, is this what you were talking about? Or can we talk about this? I think we might be a good fit. So I put a lot into that when I don't need someone, so that when I do, the connections are already there. And I will say the other 20% that I love to recruit from, and this is specifically for entry-level positions, more admin, I still love Craigslist. I think you get a
Really?
lot of, yeah, I do. I love Craigslist. I don't use any of the other things that are out there.
That's where I sell everything.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
when I moved to Orange County, we had a bunch of stuff to sell, and I became a Craigslist,er, and it works.
Yeah.
It's magic.
It's $45 to post a job,
Yep.
and I get a lot of great people, but I will say again, it's like your receptionist, it's your office admin, it's just more entry level, more basic role. Okay, so keep your job descriptions, this is going to sound weird, somewhat vague, and open them up. And I say that because you want to get more candidates in. And I love people who are willing to fight for a position. So I would list like 3 things that you have to have. Must have a bachelor's degree, must be an excellent communicator, must have a great attitude, and maybe you go into challenging environment, must be self-motivated, stuff like that. So keep it very simple. I have candidates all the time say, gosh, the job description was really vague. So I wasn't 100% sure of what I was getting into, but the company looked cool. And to your point earlier about marketing, yourself for candidates. And so I just thought I would apply and see what happens. And then you find these great people. And if you had been so specific, I need these 32 qualifications for you to apply for the position, no one's going to try. If you're not getting applicants, that's why. So open up the hiring pool.
Yeah, we talk about narrowing your position when you market your firm, meaning if you're going to do, cannabis industry, whatever. But we always talk about narrowing it so far that there's no real audience. There's 6 people out there, so your pool is very small.
Exactly. And then, so for technical roles, if there's a way for you to test the technical piece before they come in to that first interview, that's great. If you can give them a little like take home test or have someone who can call them and do like here's 3 questions,
it's almost like a continuing education class. Like give them a real short one.
Yeah.
Let's see how you do.
Yeah. And then for non-technical roles, I look for the attitude first. I care a little bit less about what they've done. I care a little bit less about how long they've been at each position. I want to know if do I want to spend my days with this person? Do they have a great attitude? Because I think you can teach someone just about anything if they have a willingness to learn it and they have a great attitude.
I think that is good. I'm going to go now to keeping your high performers. And one of the questions I had is, and we've talked about we've covered a little of this, but what is the best way to acknowledge high performers without alienating the rest of the staff? And I think it's important though. So, what would be some of your suggestions there?
Well, I think you just need to be human and look for ways to connect with them. We talked about this before. So I love like the simple conversations. Like, okay, let's say Bob is doing a great job. Let's say he just killed it on a project or he's been handling more clients than anyone else, right? I'm not going to go to Bob and say, I'm giving you this great job, because Bob's just going to be like, cool. So I would make it more of an intentional connection. Hey, how are you doing? What do you do on your free time? Like, hey, we haven't connected. Here, come to my office or sit at my desk with me. And then after you've had that basic like entry conversation, I'm glad you had a minute to chat. I wanted to thank you for the job that you did on this project, or you're doing such a great job. I want you to know that I'm noticing it. I really appreciate it. And by the way, I wanted to give you this gift card because I feel like, I just wanted to say thank you and also say thank you with this as well. It doesn't, and I think a lot of times business owners or managers, they don't take the time to say thank you because they are afraid that the employee thinks it's going to mean more money. Well, a gift card is money, right? I have a friend who owns a law firm, and right now he just gave a bunch of his staff $50 gas gift cards. That's huge right now. Gas prices are through the roof, right? And what they did is they turned around and they all, like a few of them posted it on social media and said like, best boss in the world, like is understanding of current situations, So it doesn't have to be big. if you think it has to be big, it's scary. You're not going to have time for it, and you're not going to feel like you have money for it. But once a quarter, you go over to Costco and you buy a ton of $25 and $50 gift cards to various places. And then when you're ready to say thank you to someone, you're already set. Bring you in. How are you doing? Thank you, by the way, wanted to give you this, and keep up the great work. Let me know if you need anything. I love having you in the office. Okay. Frequent acknowledgement. That's the first piece to keeping and acknowledging high performers. And then the other piece are the annual raises. You can't put these off. When people put these off for like a year and a half, 2 years, it's very demotivating to employees. They need to see constant and periodic growth. So annual, I think, is very it's expected. It's fine. You might get people that come in after 6 months and say, hey, I want to raise.
Every 2 months.
Yeah, it's happening more and more.
Yeah.
But an annual raise, I think, is expected. And I like to scale these. So for the first 2 or 3 years, they should be higher raises. And I talk about that up front. So you had an amazing year. I want to give you a 15% raise or a 20% raise. And I want to be clear, this isn't how it's always going to be, but at the beginning, there's so much to learn and there's so much that you're doing. I really want to reward you for the efforts that you're making. So we're going to get you up here. It's going to go this way, but let's get you up there first. So this year, this is what we're doing. You have a couple years of that. 4 or 5, maybe it comes down to like 8 to 10%, and then ongoing, maybe 5 to 8%. I will tell you, I have worked for organizations where they extended a 2% raise to someone, and that feels like a slap in the face. Very hard for an employee to deal with, especially with just how expensive things are getting. So anything less than 5%, I think you just really need to figure out how you can get yourself up there.
There was an article I read about culture in Japan, and it was an accounting position. And I think they started the base, but it was like a $4 raise annually. It was the craziest thing I've ever read. But it also made you think how lucky we are to be in the United States and have opportunities all over the place. So I think that's very good. Actually, I front loading them. I've done that actually by accident. Younger people that are newer and gaining new experience, I usually bump them more purely from their getting more responsibility. But not on, there was no strategy behind it, which makes me kind of laugh. But I think that's some really good advice. So I want to move into the unfun stuff of operations and HR. And I want to talk about some common issues and some things that come up that people need to know about and kind of how to relate to it or how to deal with it. So we're getting out of the fun part. What we've been talking about is all the fun stuff, but let's get into a little bit of we'll do this and then get into some of the horror stories. So take it away.
One of my really good friends is an employment attorney. And so we talk about these types of things, some of the just scary pitfalls of managing people. And what he says, he goes after employers the most when they're just horrible human beings. He's like, if a business owner is actually just really, really trying hard to do the right thing, that shows and it goes a long way. So I'm going to first say that you need to try and be a good person when you're dealing with whatever these situations are. So I would say I tried to narrow this down to one, and honestly, I would say health issues are probably the biggest thing where the health issue might cause a decline in performance, or it may cause the employee to need to be out a lot, or they become less dependable. Those are all things that happen as a result of that. So meeting with the employee and showing them some sympathy and letting them know that you know what's going on. There's two sides to this, right? So sometimes employees want to talk about it, sometimes they don't. If they don't want to talk about the specifics of whatever it is that they're dealing with, I like that because then I'm not on the hook for the specificity of whatever issue it is that they're dealing with. But if they want to talk about it, then I jump really far into it. So I make sure I understand and nothing catches me off guard. Usually what people want to know is, well, who needs to know? If there's, I don't know what everyone's structure is. Obviously, it's very different from one place to the next. So if you have a direct report and I'm the HR or I own the business, do I need to let that direct report know, that manager? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say you don't tell them. But what I would do is if this employee came and talked to me and said, hey, I just was diagnosed with cancer, or my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and it might affect things a little bit, right? You have the understanding conversation. Now I'm going to go to that direct report or anyone who works with that person closely. And I'm going to say, hey, how's John doing? Oh, they're doing well. Okay, great. That's wonderful. Let's just keep in touch for the next little while and let me know if anything comes up that I need to be made aware of. And if this is you and you're that person, then you need to approach it the same way. So how is their performance? You need to keep, really tight rein on that, even more so. I think, again, some people are like, well, now I just can't touch them because I don't want to get sued. Like, I just need to let them do whatever they need to do. No, actually, you don't. Really, the only time you have to change how you're managing that person is if a doctor writes a letter to you requesting certain accommodations for that employee. So as long as that hasn't happened, you need to maintain performance. You need to have certain expectations. If they ask for something, you need to ask yourself, is this something I can do for them? If you can, great. If you can't, then you can't, right? If they come back with a doctor's note that says they have to have this accommodation, depending on how many employees you have, you could still say, well, I just don't have that within my organization. You're not obligated to bend over and make every accommodation work. There is some reason within that. And then don't be hesitant to check in and make sure they're okay. You don't need to go through like the whole scenario all over again. You can just say like, hey, doing good. Everything's okay. All right, great. Let me know if you need anything. And again, I wouldn't hesitate if things did start going downhill. The first thing I would say is, these are the expectations. I know you have this going on. This is slipping. This is slipping. You can still talk about performance and expectations with this situation that's come up. And if it continues, then say, I'm in this position now where it's just not working out, but I know you're going through something, so I want to be there for you. If you could get me a doctor's note that just lets me know what accommodations I need to be looking out for you, then that would really help. And if they come back with nothing, then you can say, I'm sorry, like I'm just trying to work with you. And all of this needs to be documented. All of this needs to be documented. And I'll just touch on something else that we were maybe going to touch on. I don't know if we will, but I love using Google Docs or OneDrive, something that is just very accessible that I can constantly update and I can pull from at a moment's notice. But every conversation, everything really needs to go in there, and it needs to reflect not that you heard there was a health issue and you're trying to figure out how to fire them, but that there was a health issue, and for the sake of the profitability of your organization, you were trying to keep this person on track and give them every opportunity to succeed.
Yeah, I think that's interesting too, because a lot of times what will happen is you'll get into a situation, and if you did not document it, you're going back and looking for all the documentation. So you're collecting emails back and forth, things that were said. Using a Google Doc is obviously easy. Would you suggest having like an ongoing company-wide Google Doc of just all HR, kind of what I'll call HR red flags maybe, and that you just have it there in case you ever need it, and just keep adding to the document? Or would you make one for each employee?
I'd make one for each employee. And I would just like put a new date and then the scenario. That makes it very easy. The only, I did do something different with COVID. When COVID was just getting going and we were all trying to figure out what to do, I had a COVID doc simply because one person would get it and they happened to be sitting next to this person. So then we had to send that person home to have them test. And because this person was exposed, right? So if you have a situation, or if there's a situation like a harassment accusation or a retaliation accusation, then something big like that brings in multiple people, I would have one doc specifically for that.
The incident, almost like an incident.
Right. Incident report more.
Right.
But I would still take the pieces out that relate to the employee, and I would still add it to their own doc as well. So I'd have it on two places. Again, you just want the information easily accessible.
Got it. One thing before we go on to I want to hear a couple horror stories, if you can. But one of the things that's hard is what I'll call mental issues. So anxiety, and I've seen that more in the world, but it also has to come into the workplace. So that's a little bit different than a traditional health. When you talk about health issues, you think of physical issues. Anxiety obviously is it can become a physical issue, but is it the same kind of process where you're reaching out, what does the doctor say? What can we do? What we can't do? Because a lot of times the employee might say, this is too stressful for me. I can't do this type of, part of my job. How do you deal with that?
Well, let's say an employee comes to me in January and they're like, listen, I just have major anxiety and some things trigger that for me. Then I'm going to say to them, I just want to let you know, tax season is coming. It's about to get real and your anxiety and stress level is going to be beyond. So what I need you to identify right now, and maybe you think about it this week, is this something that you can do? Are you going to thrive in this environment, understanding the expectations that we have here? They got to figure that out. I actually love asking questions where employees just kind of self-eject because they can't show up.
You're setting them up.
Yeah. But I want them to be here if they want to be here. Right. And if it's not good for their health, again, I'm being the good guy. I'm still asking them to be real, this is going to get bad. Right. And let's say they say it's okay. Okay, that's fine. Then I might ask for a doctor's note.
Yeah, because people play games. That's the reason I'm asking that question. And I've experienced drug usage and just the whole, the experience from a leader's point of view. You're like, this is foreign to me. How do I deal with it? And you go straight into that's a health related issue, and you're worried about lawsuits, even though you're the victim, really, as the employer. You have an employee doing drugs on the job, whatever it is. So that's kind of why I was asking, just a general idea of how you handle that.
Yeah. Well, so side note to that is California is very pro employee, right?
Right.
But one thing I love about California is we're an at-will state. So if I am noticing that someone comes in and they don't look showered, or they're on Zoom, they don't look very put together, they look super worn out, maybe they don't have their video on. Oh, virtual work, I think videos should be a must, to be honest. But if I'm picking up on these things, and there's a chance that it could be something like that, drug related, might be, they're not going to be able to hang with the performance expectation long term. I'm going to let them go, and I'm not going to make it about anything other than it just wasn't a great fit. Because if I don't say it right, then it's okay. I can let them go. But if I say I'm firing them because I suspect they're using drugs and I think they have anxiety or depression, now I'm in a bad spot. But if I just say, you know what, it's not a good fit. But thank you. Then you're
There you
okay.
go.
Just
I
let
like
them
it.
know.
Can you share any legal horror stories or anything?
So not specifics.
I know I didn't ask for names. I don't want to. I'm not like the Department of Justice today. There was an article, or not an article, but they released a bunch of people that were victims or that were supposed to be sealed. And so I know we're not trying to find names and all the nitty gritty, but I'm just asking any examples or what are maybe some areas that you see people running into trouble.
Yeah. Well, so I'll tell you how I think you stay out of trouble when it comes to like the big things. And for me, I would say the big things are lawsuits, because everything kind of heads in that direction, right? The yellow brick road leads to lawsuits. And so every employee I'm interacting with, I just think, even if they're a great employee, I always kind of keep this like running list of things in my head. If this is the best or worst thing that happened to them, could they sue me for $1 million? I just assume every employee is going to sue me for $1 million at some point. Yep. And usually it's higher. But I just assume everyone wants to sue me. And so that's kind of how I lead the day-to-day things. So I think common things that happen are sexual advances. So if you're a male, you never have closed door meetings with females. You always have a third party that's there, and hopefully they're a female. Even on Zooms, I think that's really important. I've sat in on many Zooms where I've said nothing. I've just taken notes, and that saves you a lot of heartache, because anything could be misconstrued as some kind of sexual advance. Retaliation, that's a common one. Somebody comes to you and says like, hey, I'm having an issue with my manager, or I really don't like how you spoke to me in that thing, in that meeting, or in that situation, or whatever. And, you're like, I don't want the drama. I just want this person gone. I feel like so you fire them. That's retaliation. You can get sued for that, and they're probably going to win. So you got to stay away from that. And so the way you get around something like that is you just document, and you have to make it about something other than the feedback or the concern that the employee had. It needs to be about something else. I love saving, this is going to sound so silly, saving every note, every birthday card, every kind email, every type of feedback, everything. I save all of those. When I was at the law firm, I had physical files. I love paper. I love trees, but I love paper too.
I love trees more though. But yeah, you can do it digitally. You can scan and whatever.
Yes. So if you have and we had both. So I had a paper file and then I had a digital file. So I was saving these everywhere. Birthday cards to managers, birthday cards to coworkers, whatever you were able to get your hands on. And I'm telling you, when an employee might come back and say, well, this person was all over me, they harassed me, they were so inappropriate. And then I'm like, well, I have 3 emails and a birthday card, and it shows that you were very friendly with them too. Usually it's gone.
Right.
Because now they're showing that they were reciprocating it. So that is also why I think having an HR is so important. They should be someone in your corner that's just quietly observing and keeping track of all of these things. So when they come up, you can go to those things and it saves you a lot of heartache.
Which leads us to the close here. And if someone was interested in, first of all, we've covered a lot of ground. I think this isn't just for tax and accounting pros. I think anyone who wants to learn a little bit, this is a cursory high level discussion about it, but I think there's little things that you can take away here, that kind of things you don't think about. But if someone wanted to work with you and your firm, what kind of services do you offer? How would they get in contact with you?
So For smaller organizations, I find that they don't really need me ongoing. So just a periodic strategizing session where we can sit down and talk about where you are, where you want to go, how to get there in terms of people and processes. So just a 1 hour session like that. Obviously, ongoing monthly consulting. And if I'm saying things and you're like, wow, my leadership team is, maybe they've become leaders simply out of the need, but they aren't really entirely qualified leaders, then I also do a lot of leadership development. I can up their game and show them how to think about things a little bit differently to protect you. And they can find me through my website, which is your-coo.com.
Right. And it's a beautiful website. It's a lot of good information. It's very friendly and you can see your personality in it. So I think people will be very impressed. So thank you so much, Lucero, for spending time with us today. Again, accountants, we will interview people like this as we go, a lot of mostly marketing, practice management related, but I think this is a topic that is well worth investing your time and spending the hour or so on this podcast. So again, we look forward to seeing you in a future episode, and thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.